So Eimear, there was breaking news today. There was a disappearance of a young woman called Elizabeth Clarke. She vanished she was last seen in 2013, reported missing in 2015. Her disappearance has been upgraded to a murder case. She was reported missing over a year after she was last seen. Can you tell us a little bit about the circumstances around that?
Yeah, so she had been living with her father. She'd been living with a partner and his parents, and she had kind of had intermittent contact with her family over the years. She hadn't had contact with them in quite a while, so I think it was when her father or her mother's husband tried to contact her that they were told Elizabeth hasn't been seen. So she was reported missing officially then in 2015, and the family hadn't had contact with her in quite a while. And then in 2015 she was officially reported missing, but I think it was about a year before that official report was made to Gardai.
And I am from Navan, and I remember when she first went missing, her missing posters being just plastered all over the town. I mean, it's a story obviously that I followed because it's my hometown, but obviously as a journalist as well. Our Alan Cherry has had a lot of reportage on this case, in particular with the people that she lived with at the time of her disappearance. Tell us a bit about that, because there was instances where her father-in-law was seen ripping down posters.
Yeah, so Larry Stanley has done a few interviews with the Sunday World, and he's basically said that, he's had various things screamed at him in the street. He's been called a murderer in the street, that, they have no idea what happened to Elizabeth, and that, he's described her as troubled and said that she had a lot of worries and, things that were troubling her, and that, he had nothing to do with her disappearance, was obviously concerned, as he said it. And, there was instance where he was seen tearing down posters, and he said that, that had no bearing on him being involved, or he said that had nothing to do with him, possibly having anything to do with her disappearance. He's always categorically denied that, and he said that he just wants her to be found. So he identified himself basically like he would be a grandfather at this point. Larry Stanley, he spoke to us most recently, I think last year. So yeah, he said how he's been called a murderer in the street and things like that, but he's always denied it, and he's always claimed that the taking down of posters thing wasn't anything to do with trying to cover up her disappearance or anything like that. It was just pressure he was under at the time.
And he made claims in those interviews as well that he had suspected that she may have had money that she gained from drug dealing. I think the Gardai had said that they did no belief that she had been involved in anything like that, but it was his belief that she had money kind of stored away, and sort of said things like, it's possible she could have had a false passport. And this is obviously stuff that the Gardai have said. He had said that he thought that she may have had a sort of started a new life abroad, and then in later interviews said, at this point he does believe that she may be deceased. Alan Cherry also spoke to Elizabeth's own family, so her mother, is that right?
Yeah, so he has spoken to her mother kind of on and off, but he did speak to her, and her family very clearly feel that something has happened to her and are very concerned about her. So it's been a big week for them, but I guess this is, in terms of the investigation, hopefully may possibly lead to developments and to finding out more. The guards have said that, they've always continued to investigate the circumstances surrounding it, but they and it's been the subject of a massive Garda investigation by the team in Navan. But now, obviously, they said in the wake of, they've carried out loads of house-to-house inquiries, they've searched land, they've searched rivers, canals, all this kind of thing, and there's been no sighting of her in more than 10 years. So as a result of the time passed, the inquiries, the guards have reclassified the case.
And as well, I suppose the circumstances are surrounding her disappearance. The last time she was seen was on November 1st, 2013, and she was leaving the home that she had been living in Navan with her partner. Her ex-partner had said that they had broken up, and that's why she had moved out, that they'd split. But then obviously she was only reported missing that that while later. So we will obviously keep an eye on this. There must have been some sort of significant either new information or a reason for the Gardaí to upgrade it from missing persons to a murder investigation. And as you said, with a murder investigation, they're going to have a lot more tools at their disposal, be it, monetary and also, I suppose, labour, time.
Yeah, exactly. And I know people have heard in here that, from sources that it may possibly be that this has been in the works for quite a while, this upgrade. So as they said themselves in the statement, they have been doing a lot of searches and inquiries from neighbours and all that kind of thing. So this is something that they've been building towards, I suppose. So we don't know if there's any kind of like silver bullet in terms of new information, but it's something that they've been building for a while. And, they have obviously started to conduct a search of that home, and they have, gone into floorboards and things like that. So I guess they do have a clear intention anyway with that, and I suppose it remains to be seen if they find anything. But we do know with the other missing person, and particularly missing women cases that have been upgraded to murder, it does result in a lot of activity and a lot of publicity, which is, even though it's probably tough on the family, it is a good thing in the sense of, it keeps it in the spotlight.
Yeah, exactly. And as part of that as well, Gardai are saying that they're not only as part of them, announcing to the media that they've upgraded her disappearance to a murder inquiry. They said that they have state expertise involved, and they said including a forensic archaeologist if required. But they've also asked for anyone with any information to come forward in relation to the disappearance and her murder. They said don't assume that that on Garda Síochána either know that information that you may have or that it has a limited value. They said let the investigation team make that assessment. So they're saying come forward if you have any information. Nothing's too small. It'll be treated sensitively. Yeah. And of course they're saying it's up, the Gardaí will decide whether it's a piece of information that's significant or not to hold back.
Exactly, yeah, because we've seen this in previous cases as well, where things change, loyalties change. People may have had not told certain information for they believed innocent reasons, and then they're to find out that actually I was giving an alibi for completely, that reason didn't exist anymore, that our relationships have changed, and people, guilty consciences come back and all that kind of thing. So I think with was it Phyllis Murphy, the woman that was
yes,
she was doing her Christmas shop, and then was it John Creer that raped and murdered her? I believe that he was given a alibi by a colleague. The colleague didn't realise obviously what he was giving an alibi for. He thought it was an innocent alibi, like for an innocent reason. So these things can happen, and then obviously people in relationships and things like that things can change too. So I guess the guards are probably trying to suggest that to people that may have information that they might not have felt comfortable coming forward with in the past, that it will be treated with sensitivity, and they just want to get to the bottom of this.
And with regards to that, are there any suspects in the case?
I don't believe, to our knowledge, there aren't any clear suspects. Obviously, there's a lot of, rumours and speculation over the years, and Larry Stanley had appointed himself as a suspect through his interviews with us, and has basically said that he's been called a murderer, and he's been targeted by certain people, and and has made it clear that he says he wasn't involved. So in terms of suspects, that's the person that's been put out there publicly, but in terms of from Gardai's perspective, I think they've a lot of different lines of inquiries, and we're not I think there's definitely probably theories that they're looking at and people that they're looking at, and they're obviously searching a house for a reason, and they'd be looking at if they do find anything there, they they're obviously have certain reasons to go in there, and whoever's linked to that home could be someone that they're looking at. But I think it's one of those cases that it's complex case. She seemed to have been a complex person as well, and there was a lot of different things that has been looked at over the years. So I suppose it's going to be a while. It's going to be one that will continue on, I think, until it might take a bit of time before hopefully we can find out what happened to Elizabeth.
Yeah, no, and we'll definitely keep an eye on that one. But let's move on to some other crime news this week. So there was a 24-year-old man who was found not guilty of murder, but guilty of manslaughter. Can you tell us a little bit about Dylan McCarthy and what happened to him?
Yeah, so Dylan McCarthy died in a melee outside a pub in Kildare town nearly 3 years ago. So there was a group involved in a fight basically, and he sustained severe injuries to his head, and died as a result. So 2 guys went on trial for his murder: Calvin Dunn, a 24-year-old, and Sean Kavanagh, a 26-year-old. So the judge has previously directed the jury to find Sean Kavanagh not guilty of murder. Sean Kavanagh then entered a plea of assault causing harm to Dylan McCarthy, the victim's father, and will also admitted violent disorder is going to be taken into account in that. So the charges against Sean Kavanagh were essentially left, and then the jury resumed deliberations in relation to Calvin Dunn, who had been accused of the murder of Dylan McCarthy. So today, Calvin Dunn was found not guilty of murdering, but guilty of manslaughter. So of killing Dylan McCarthy, but the jury had been directed by the judge that, like, if they found that it was an element of self-defense but that it was unreasonable, so they found that he didn't intend to murder somebody, that he was trying to protect himself, but he used unreasonable force, that was grounds for finding a manslaughter verdict. So they did come back with that manslaughter verdict. I think it was a majority verdict, so it was the 10 to 2.
Yeah,
so it wasn't everybody on the jury, but
so that one we don't have that he won't be sentenced. He won't be sentenced till a later date.
Yeah.
With regards to the other charges, so the other man that you mentioned, he was he due to go on trial alongside?
He was on trial. He was on trial, and then
and accused of murder.
He was also accused of murder. So this guy's name is Sean Kavanagh. He's a 26-year-old, and he was accused of murder as well. But the judge directed to the jury to find him not guilty of murder.
Okay.
So during the evidence, there was obviously melee outside the pub, and there was punches thrown, and there was evidence given by the defendants that they claimed Dylan McCarthy had been violent towards them, and his father, Eimear McCarthy, was there as well. So Sean Kavanagh's defence was that he wasn't involved in any kind of fatal blows, and he was involved in some kind of punching. But I guess the judge directed a not guilty of murder verdict there, but then he was rearranged. And when he was rearranged, he was basically brought back up again. He put in a guilty plea to assault causing harm to Dylan McCarthy's father. So
essentially the state would enter a null prosequi in terms of the murder charge, right?
Yeah.
And then he was recharged then with assault causing harm.
Yeah. So basically the jury will be told, do you know the way you get issue paper if you're a jury, and you were basically told to mark on that not guilty. So that was what they were told. But then he was given this charge of assault, and he pleaded guilty to that. And then violent disorder in relation to the incident in general will be taken into account. So he'll be sentenced with Calvin Dunn in May, but there'll be victim impact statements heard as well. So Calvin Dunn, he continued to be tried for murder, but he was found guilty of killing him. And I suppose the evidence probably that was damning against him was that there was a lot of witness evidence given in relation to a kick. So someone described it as, a kick to the head that made quite a loud noise. He said that he kicked him in the chest. He denied that. He said, he was just trying to defend himself. But I guess, he was ultimately found guilty of manslaughter, which is still killing somebody. And there was also strong evidence given during the trial from the victim's father, Eimear McCarthy, who basically said that, he knew his son was gone. He could see his eyes rolling in his head and everything. So, obviously, and he was in court today to hear that verdict. So,
And were both men on remand, or were they out on bail during the trial?
I believe that they were on bail because we've had pictures of them coming in and going from court. So I do believe that they were on bail.
And they would obviously be taken into custody then today after that verdict is read, awaiting sentencing.
Calvin Dunn will be anyway taken into custody, yeah.
So elsewhere, crime news, I suppose this is a big one that has featured on Crime World over the last while, and that is the story of the MV Matthew, which of course was that boat in Kerry, Cork.
Yeah, Cork, just off the coast of Cork. Yeah, it was came into Cork Port. I don't think it was in Cork Port. I think they had information that there was obviously something very
mothership,
suspicious going on.
I suppose it was, yeah.
So it was boarded by, and then it was brought into Cork Port later, but it was boarded by Gardai and Army Ranger wing, which is like a high element of the defence forces. It was all very dramatic, and they found over 2 tons of cocaine with a street value apparently of €157 million. So with the biggest seizure of drugs ever in Ireland. And there was several men, there was 8 men overall, I believe, arrested. One, an English guy, had pleaded guilty previously, and then only me and Nicola were talking about, myself and Nicola were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. A Ukrainian man pleaded guilty to possession of drugs, and he there was 6 other guys who were trying to get the charges dropped, and obviously it went ahead. And when the trial was due to take place this week, 4 of these men pleaded guilty to the possession of these drugs, and there's 2 more that have pleaded not guilty, and they're going to go on trial in the Special Criminal Court very shortly, I believe.
So those 4 men, they've pleaded guilty, so obviously they're not going to face trial. How many are going to go on trial now? 2 more people?
2 more are going to go on trial. So basically these 6 men had made an application to have the case thrown out under this particular legislation, but you're actually not allowed to report on the reasons why. So it was a closed hearing, and the judge obviously decided that the cases were to go ahead. So the 6 men were due to go on trial earlier this week, when they failed to have these charges dismissed. Before them were brought to the court. Obviously the Special Criminal Court is a non-jury court, and they were arraigned on those charges, and they pleaded guilty. And I suppose the charge is quite long, but essentially it's that between September 24th and 26th, 2023, locations outside the state on board the vessel MV Matthew, they had in their possession controlled drugs, namely cocaine, for the purpose of selling or otherwise supplying the drug to another in contravention of the Misuse of Drugs Act. So that, it goes on and on, but essentially, and it's the charge is always says to a drug more than 13,000, but we know that's just a technical thing. We know that it's far more. It's the drugs are actually believed to be worth 157 million, and it obviously come from South America. The ship is registered in Panama, so and Nicola has spoken before about how the Canadian cartel may have had involvement with this as well, and obviously the drugs wouldn't have remained here; they would have been shipped on elsewhere. So so there's still 2 men before the court, but they have pleaded not guilty. So there's an Iranian man, Saeed Hassani, he's 39, and then there's a Filipino man, Harold Estoesta. Forgive me if that's wrong, he's 31, and they're going to stand trial on Monday before the Special Criminal Court. And as well, because it's going ahead, the trial is going ahead at least in some capacity, we will obviously hear a lot more detail than we wouldn't have heard should it had not gone to trial. So there's going to be a lot of new information coming out about that. Well, Eimear Rabbitt, that was this week in the world of crime. Thank you very much. Thanks, Clodagh.